I guess one of the difficulties for us at Sheffield Hallam is that Pedalpad is utilised by a number of members of staff on a range of courses across the institution, but it's not actually supported by the institution. So there are a number of enthusiasts who've seen the system, used it, and somehow secured funding to enable them to embed it and utilise it within their course programmes. So that makes it slightly difficult in that our use of Pedalpad isn't centrally supported. Having said that, the support we receive from Pedalpad when we have problems or any difficulties, which I have to say are few and far between, is very quick and very responsive, and most things are normally sorted within a day, which is really good. The attitudes of staff who are using it, obviously they're all very positive and they're all enthusiasts. Other colleagues within the faculty are less enthusiastic, which is perhaps not unnatural, in that similarly the use of the VLE is very diverse within the faculty. There are some people who use it very effectively and are very into that mode of learning, and there are others that just engage with it as much as they need to satisfy university requirements for the students. So those are the key things. We've not really had any technical problems to speak of in terms of Pedalpad, because it's hosted externally and they resolve that for us, but the technical problems we've had, I could count on one hand over 3 years. The main problems we tend to get are initially when students start to use it, in that you get questions about, I can't log on, and that's usually because they're using their VLE password and login. Because the university doesn't support it, we can't have a single login and password, so they have a separate Pedalpad login and password. So it's usually that they've used the wrong login and password, or if they can log in, the next most common query is, I can't view anything, and that's because they forgot to go to the home page, download the latest version of Flash, so that they could view it. And those have been the two main problems really. Apart from that, we don't have any issues in terms of utilising it. The financial difficulties, I guess it varies across the different teams, because they're all getting the funding from different pots, and sometimes you're having to fight for the funding on an annual basis. We were quite fortunate on my programme in that I was able to get the fees for Pedalpad embedded into the course fees for the students as well, so that on an ongoing basis we can continue to utilise it, and I don't need to worry about chasing funding every year to support that until the university makes a decision on what they're going to do.
I think the most notable difficulties we've had recently have been around technical issues. I mean, I know it's not a technical issue, but people getting to grips with the software is actually quite a big barrier in the initial, and sort of understanding what it can do and what it does do. But the technical things are sort of small individual user-based errors that sort of, it doesn't work at home, people can't access it at home because of some sort of setting. We've had problems with people's wireless routers, we've had problems with people's internet browsers and so on. So it's difficult to solve those things because we don't have control over people's settings. And I had someone come in with their laptop, and it worked fine on their laptop over the university wireless network. Took it home and it won't work. So it's all those little things. You see, how do you support that? And that there's nothing really we can do as a university, but it's actually quite important for that individual user if they can't access it at home. In terms of some of the benefits in terms of privacy, is that it's one of the few really learner-centered pieces of technology we have, and I think people are quite surprised when explained to them how private it is and that nobody has any kind of access to it unless they make that decision themselves as a user. So I think that's been quite an interesting one.
Staff have generally been very positive towards the introduction of an e-portfolio, although it has always been voluntary here at the University of Cumbria, unless you're part of the postgraduate certificate in learning and teaching in higher education. However, some of the staff that have been resistant have been unable to see the benefits of an e-portfolio in the longer term. So for instance, it's very frequently compared with, say, a Word document or an email attachment. You know, why can't I just put it on an email, or why can't I just write my appraisal in a Word document? So the attitudes have tended to be, I would say, a reliance on the existing ways of working rather than actual resistance to a new portfolio. Some of the reasons why people have actually enjoyed using it is because of the privacy and the confidential nature of the system that we've chosen, and even to the point where our system is actually hosted externally, and some people have expressed the view that they're more comfortable with the fact that the university isn't hosting a system that records their own personal reflections and their CPD. So generally I would say staff have been very receptive to actually trying out an e-portfolio. Now, that doesn't mean that they've actually been using it extensively. We've then encountered problems with things like time to learn the new system, and as I've mentioned previously about using it with their line managers and the support of other people who will be looking at the work that they produce and they decide to share. With regard to technical problems, they've been probably kept to a minimum, I would say. The system seems very robust. The things that we have encountered that have caused barriers have been the necessity for Flash player to be installed on the PC that you're using it on, and staff have assumed that when they log on, if they haven't got Flash player installed, that it's their own lack of IT skills that have caused the problem rather than the fact that there isn't the appropriate plugin installed. But we have got around that in a number of ways by putting a note on the front, the logon page, and had continued discussions with ICTS about making Flash Player available to all staff.
At present, we haven't come across any technical difficulties or obstacles when using the ePortfolio software. We have a hosted service. It's relatively small scale, with around about 750 licenses at the moment. So the technical difficulties have been non-existent, to be quite honest. In terms of financial difficulties, there'll be implications obviously on resources perhaps for training. Whether or not our pilot is successful will inform whether we go ahead with a campus license or a larger scale license agreement. Obviously that will have financial implications. And in terms of privacy and confidentiality, I guess it's just a case of allaying staff fears and letting them see that it's not as insecure. Hopefully putting policies and procedures in place so that we have a hosted service. There aren't direct links with our virtual environments, just to ensure that staff are reassured that administrators or IT professionals don't have access to personal PebblePad accounts.
I think our main issues have been about staff visualising what the portfolio system is and getting confused between thinking about an e-portfolio system, that means me taking a paper-based portfolio and bringing it online. And because we're using PebblePad particularly, this is a huge system, and it's them understanding that this is a system that has potential for them in many different ways. They can obviously use it with their students, and that's going to be their number one priority. They can obviously use it for themselves, for their own studies, and they can also use it for their own CPD. And it's understanding that it's a flexible tool that can be used in that way takes an awful lot of time. So that's our first issue. Our second issue is obviously technical skills. Some of our staff are very technical, like our radiography staff, and they've walked with it. Whereas other staff are less comfortable with IT per se, let alone IT for anything else. So that takes us a lot of time to get them comfortable, even with PebblePad, which is very easy to use. Issues regarding, I'm just trying to think of any other issues we've had. Obviously the other issues is things like initiative fatigue, time, getting time in the curriculum when staff are working with students, the curriculum is already overloaded. That's quite hard. And the final issue, I suppose, is the technical issue. When students and staff are out with Queen Margaret, it is possible to access PebblePad, and most staff and students don't have problems. But if you're working in a hospital, a lot of our staff are part-time, and will work in a hospital, you've got issues of files.